Howdy, howdy, howdy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. You lovely folks joining me here nice and early over at HowlingMines. It's a pleasure to welcome you back. Thank you for checking out the content once again. You might notice things have sharpened up a little. I know a few people have kind of reached out to me on socials and that's been great. But the intention is very much to give this a go. I'm hoping now that I'm back from Nationals, in the job that I'm in now, I have more time to start making content again. And the plan is very much to get to grips with streaming and creating some flesh and blood content for myself and for other people, which we'll get into in just a little bit. If you like what you see, let me know. If you've got feedback, by all means let me know. But I'm very much looking forward to being able to do some of this. Talishar, just a fantastic tool. I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to stream some games with you guys, stream some games and testing with my friends, and most importantly, maybe just be able to do commentary as well on other people's games, offer some feedback, maybe some coaching, something to that effect. So if you're interested in that at all, please let me know and consider subscribing. Either here on YouTube down below, hit that button, turn on the bell, or follow me on your social media of choice. I'm HowlingMines everywhere, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all over the place. Or come and chat with me in Discord as well. All the links you need will be down in the description box below. But that's not all we're here for today. We're here for an update on Iyslander. If you don't know, this weekend was the UK National Championships, an event I've been very much looking forward to. It's one I wanted pretty bad, honestly. The UK Nationals is just being UK National Champion is a title that I'm super interested in getting my hands on one day. But sadly, this weekend just gone, not the day for it. That being said, our result wasn't bad. I finished in 14th place out of everyone in the UK. This weekend with a record of 8-4. Unfortunately for me, the draft portion is what let me down, but fortunately for you, that means my Iyslander list was in fact a good call for the weekend. I went 5-1 in CC with Iyslander this weekend with an updated list from my list from Pro Tour Lille, and 3-3 in draft, unfortunately leaving us short of top 8, even though our record was the same as some folks who did make it. I want to give some quick shout-outs before we start breaking this down. My teammates are fantastic. I test with a lot of folks, including Liam, James, and George over at the 0 to 60 podcast based in Manchester. They're my closest folks, and I travel to them with every event, and they're fantastic, and you should check them out if you haven't done so already. We've got to meet up with all kinds of lovely folks at the event. Other Iyslander aficionados such as Shamir, the guy that pushed the point, Dan, Simon, and Hamish, just all kinds of figureheads of the UK community. And it was a fantastic event, and it was a pleasure to see so many of you there. So thank you very much for your company while we did all of this. If you're looking for detailed Iyslander content, you've come to the place, because we are actually going to do one better than we did last time around. This time, we're using the fantastic tools offered to us by Fabrary. This is a fantastic website, and I'm not sponsored, but I could be if you're watching. Use it. Lets you show you all your decks, all your matchup breakdowns and sideboard plans, all your results, your data, your stats. You can demo hands, you can check spoilers, you can do all kinds of stuff over here. You can even import your deck directly to Talishar to play it on the client. And if what you want is to do that with this exact deck list, my February link is down below. You can click on it, get all the sideboard plans ready, built, just like completely ready to go, and just play it on Talishar yourself, which is insane. This website is fantastic, and I cannot recommend it enough. As I say, the list has changed quite a bit since Lille. The format's changed noticeably off the back of Prism leaving the format, and the kind of dominance of these Guardians and other similar strategies. Oldhim becoming more aggressive and playing more reds, and this kind of thing. So very different, and that requires some adjustment and some changes, which you'll see in this list that I played at Nationals. We're going to go through card by card, breaking things down, explaining our thought processes, and telling you some of the changes we made and explaining why they were made. So, in this current iteration, your core of the deck is 42 cards, as you can currently see on screen. Those are 42 that you play in every single matchup, and don't get changed one way or the other. You bring in 18 to bring up yourself to 60 cards in every matchup you play. So noticeably things that have changed to start with in this core. I believe there is only one change, making sure I'm not being silly. 1.5 changes. So most of this remains the same as Leal. The core has changed to include 3 copies of Yellow Aether Ice Vein. This is a card that I was wrong about. I was really happy playing the 6 that I did in Leal, but the truth is I don't think you should ever be playing less than 9. Ice Vein is just your best tempo tool in so many matchups alongside things like Insidious Chill, Amulet of Ice, or even just by itself to be able to push arcane damage and disrupt your opponent's hand. It's just your best damage spell. And being able to play one that deals 4, which often gets through most people's AB, can kill Thamai in a pinch, which is a thing we'll get onto when we kind of discuss some more choices for the deck in the future. And be a yellow that pitches to Waning Moon as well, all in that one package, just makes the yellow one good enough, and better than most spells by a significant margin. I don't see myself moving off of 9 Ice Veins anytime soon. They block 3 in a pinch at the worst, and I very much recommend you do the same. In terms of the other change, we're down to just 2 freezing points in the core. We don't start 3 in every matchup anymore, and the reason for that, the card is a bit suspect, should we say, against aggro. It's definitely your worst red damage attack in the more aggressive matchups, your Fais, your Briars, your Visceris, this kind of stuff. And drawing it sometimes can just be super, super clunky if you draw a multi-red hand, especially given that in a lot of those matchups you're bringing in a lot of defense reactions and other reds that can quite often pollute your non-blue card pool. So I've moved this down to 2, and I think that's acceptable because we are playing more damage than we used to in the core, thanks to these 3 Yellow Aether Ice Veins, so it's okay for us to be on 1 less freezing point in exchange. The thing that kind of led to this decision, more than anything else, in terms of increasing the amount of damage we play in every matchup, is mostly a concession to the existence of Dromai to start with. I very much started testing additional red arcane effects, because that matchup is all about racing. You're very much trying to just hit them with as much arcane as you can, nice and tall, big red arcane spells early, so that you don't have to try and push so much damage through Ashwings later. You really only ever kill Thamai in terms of dragons, otherwise most of your arcane goes at their face, right up until the very end of the game, where you start time walking them by popping smaller dragons with blue arcane spells. So I found that I fell in love with the Yellow Aether Ice Vein, and you'll see that a lot of people are playing Red Aether Hail over Encase in this matchup, for that matchup I should say. As something I tested quite extensively heading into the event. I was actually on Red Aether Hail right up until the very last minute. But I do think, for me at least, I want to be able to have good 2-card hands in most matchups with my reds. And Encase lets you do that, and I just don't find that Aether Hail does. I think Aether Hail very systematically has the problem of like being good alongside Moon off of a blue, but it kind of forces you to keep a 3rd card if you want to have a turn, because you very much want to pitch a card, play Moon, and arsenal a card. Of course, you can play it off the Tunic Resource, but I think for the most part, I'd just rather hold my Tunic Resource for Oasis Respite or Cold Snap or even my Storm Striders, perhaps. I think Encase is just the better card in most matchups. The text is still very relevant. And I do admit that makes me weaker to Dromai. So if you're looking to build a list that is very good into Dragon Lady, maybe consider making that switch, because the more tall red arcane you have, the better. Beyond that, the core has remained largely the same. You'll see that we're playing a few less things in the core that now are sideboard choices, because they are not so much in every matchup anymore. Maybe we've made space, maybe we've built some new tools in for those matchups, so they don't just get played in every single matchup anytime. But everything you see here, right up until this Nourishing Emptiness, so Emptiness, Chill, all the way backwards, are cards you play in every matchup. So we're going to go through these real briefly before we go on to the rest of the things down here. Blue Aether Hail, we talked about this in depth in our last Iyslander deck tech, so feel free to check that out if you haven't already. Please give it a look. It is just your best on-rate card. It is a blue ice card, block 3, that deals damage. And again, we're kind of ticking boxes with Iyslander. What we're looking to do is play cards that do as many of the things we want them to do as we possibly can. And a lot of those boxes are blue cards, ice cards, blocks 3, because those are the most important things that we care about in most matchups. Aether Hail is all of those. It plays exceptionally well alongside Waning Moon out of your arsenal to let you kind of push 5 arcane damage, sometimes more from the Frostbite if they happen to have a Frost Hex in play. It's just your bread and butter blue, and you should love it to bits. Aether Ice Vein, still just the best attack, as we kind of explained a minute ago with the yellows. Just the best damage spell that you can have in this deck. It's so disruptive, takes so many turns away from people in combination with Amulets and Insidious Chills, and it's just fantastic by itself. You're more than happy to keep 3 cards to play the red one, and sometimes even the yellow one, in matchups where it's your key card. So yeah, wouldn't not play 9 in the foreseeable future, I think. Still on 2 Amulet of Ice. Again, cards that don't block are very much a commodity, and you've got to be careful how many you play, much like cards that block 2. It is important to have extra copies of Insidious Chill that are like one-time bursts to be able to do it more consistently in Frost Hex matchups for combo kills, and against the aggro matchups to just stop their hands being so powerful against you in combination with like Coronet Peak and Insidious Chill. That being said, I'm still playing the Heart of Fiendel in this list, which we'll get onto in a bit. So I want no more than 3 cards that don't block in my core, and that means I'm not playing a 3rd Amulet as a result. If you are missing that Heart of Fiendel, once again, I think you can pretty happily play the 3rd Amulet of Ice in that slot if you're looking for something to fill it in, and that should be mostly okay. But I do think the Heart is still the better card overall. Kano Lake Frigid, not a whole lot to say about this that we haven't said in the past. Again, ticking boxes here. Blue, Ice card, block 3. Doesn't play quite so well with Moon. You can often use your Tunic resource on a Tunic turn to Moon alongside this from your arsenal. But Channel Lake Frigid is just one of the best pieces of interaction in the game. Slows so many of the aggro decks down. Fantastic in the mirror matches, causing people to be off-tempo. There's all kinds of stuff this card is just fantastic into, and you want it everywhere. You don't always play it, necessarily. Obviously, against like Guardians and stuff, it's like fairly medium. But the card is still very strong, and should be in your deck in every matchup, just because it is a blue ice block 3. Cold Snap, still think this card is insane. Cold Snap is incredible as far as I'm concerned. Plays very, very well again with Moon, always replacing that card, draws you a card up to another 4-card hand, while pushing 3 Arcane and making a Frostbite, and maybe even freezing an ally or an arsenal in exchange. It's got to be that good because it does only block 2. So you got to make sure your block 2s are completely insane. And Cold Snap is. So please never play less than 3 of this card. We kind of talked briefly about Encase a moment ago. I still want my red attacks to either be able to fuse, which is a big one for me with Amulets and Insidious Chills. I think Aether Hail not doing that is a really big turn-off for me alongside the points we kind of talked about already. But I think this is just good enough on rate. I do admit that as Iyslander gets more popular, this card is getting a bit worse. You don't really want your red effects to be dealing 3 Arcane in that matchup, because it's so easy for them to prevent 3 Arcane kind of trivially, honestly, with Encase. And a lot of people are now bringing AB3, AB4, which makes this effect like a lot more medium. That being said, the text is still super relevant, turning off equipment just as powerful as ever, stopping all kinds of things like effects Quill Hands being popped, tectonic plating, any number of things really. Even like Snapdragon Scalers. It's just a really powerful effect to have tacked onto a 0-cost block 3. Triggers all your fuse effects, which is super important in my opinion. So yeah, I think probably the worst of your red attacks right now. I could definitely see this one becoming something else in the future, but I'm still really big on this whole play good 2-card hands, be able to fuse to trigger your chills mentality. So I'm still on Encase, and I think I will be for some time. Freezing Point. This is your best red attack in the combo style matchups, or the more controlling matchups, because it pushes the most damage off of a Stormstriders or even during your own turn. But as we kind of mentioned earlier on, it is easily the worst one into aggro, because it's quite hard to keep a hand that plays it profitably, that isn't just a raw lump of 5 Arcane. So always going to start 2 of these at the minimum. It fusing, again, super important. It's going to trigger all those chills and stuff that you want to whenever you're playing a red attack. But not quite so all in on these in games in general now. The third one comes in a lot of matchups, but isn't in every single matchup. Frost Hex, again, ticking boxes. Blue Ice block 3, really, really strong stuff. As we kind of talked about in detail in our previous Iyslander video, you don't want to play this into most people that aren't Guardians or Dorinthea. The Guardians and Dori, you'll try and set up Frost Hex kills. I guess the mirror also counts. You will indeed play these out in the mirror match to try and set up some chill Hex damage as you try and tempo each other out. But beyond that, it's mostly going to block for you, fuse for you, pitch for you, more than anything else. And that is good enough to make the cut in every matchup, for sure, no doubts. But it's definitely the card required to let you win those Guardian matchups, so make sure it's in your deck. 3 blue Frostings, again, looking at the box ticking mentality here. Blue pitch, ice, block 3, all those bases covered. This one, the effect is really lackluster, unsurprisingly. Deal 1 arcane, not the strongest effect. But you do want cheap cards to play out of your arsenal alongside Waning Moon on turns where you intend to do something else with the 1 resource. Be that Ironhide Gauntlet, be that Oasis Respite, be that Preventing Arcane. It's really, really good to allow you to push tempo damage with your Moon because it costs 0, so you can do that while doing something else. It still creates a Frostbite coming out of the arsenal, very powerful with all those Frostbite matters style effects, be them Freezing Point, Frost Hex, etc. Just another bread and butter card. I know a lot of people have been moving away from it as one of the most lackluster ice blues. I do think it's still just good enough to see play in the deck and should be just part of your bread and butter in every matchup. Heart of Yendel, I'm still very much in the camp that this card is required. I shouldn't say required, honestly. I think it's correct. I think it's correct to play the Heart in the deck. I do think you can play without it and not be horribly punished or lose millions of games that you shouldn't lose. But I think the Heart is very, very strong. I didn't keep track of how much life it gave me this weekend, to be completely fair. But the number was at least the amount of CC rounds I played. So at minimum 6 in 6 rounds. The card's just very, very strong in terms of giving you longevity. You often are more than happy to keep 2 cards to kind of pitch to Coronet Peak Arsenal, or just pitch to Coronet Peak if you've kept a card in your arsenal and blocked with 3 cards. It's not hard to get it out of your hand and continue to get value from it, especially given how often you get the second cycle. So I do think you're better off playing it. It will just incidentally win you games alongside things like Oasis Respite. So I do recommend it. I think the cards are still very, very strong. Blue Ice Bolt, once again, just kind of ticking boxes for what we want here. Blue, Ice card, block 3. Super, super strong every single matchup. This is one, again, that you don't arsenal. You find you arsenal it sometimes when you want to set it up alongside a Tunic turn to play it alongside a Waning Moon. But beyond that, it's kind of hard to get out. It can get a bit stuck in a lot of spots, but it does give you a lot of reach in the end game. It's really strong in matchups like Guardian, like Iyslander, where pitching these early can indeed come back around and mean that you're setting up quite a bit of burst damage on your final turns from having a blue damage effect in your arsenal, plus your Stormstriders, plus your Frost Hex damage, plus your Waning Moon. So it's quite reasonable at that, which plays quite well with pitching ice cards to go alongside your Ice Eternals too. And sometimes if your opponent doesn't pressure you and you have no red in hand, you will just play an Ice Bolt in your own turn to deal 3 Arcane and activate Moon or something to that effect. But don't be scared to block with this one. It does block fairly often and does get pitched away fairly often as well. Ice Eternal, sheesh, this card is just really good. Again, not one you arsenal very much. You do very much use this primarily in those Guardian Frost Hex style matchups where you want to set up that kill, strip their hand away with Amulet of Ice, Insidious Chill, and let the damage from Ice Eternal and the Frost Hexes you've set up just take the game away by 20 to 25 damage. That being said, you can just play it for 0 and fuse it to trigger Insidious Chill and stuff like this. It's a card you can play from Stormstriders in a pinch to shut turns down. And I've found that as I play Iyslander more, I am playing this more in other matchups. Not a lot. It's not fair to say that it comes up very, very often. But I have now found myself occasionally playing an Ice Eternal into a Briar to turn a turn off after a Gorganian Tome or something. So keep your eyes open for spots where that might be powerful and might be worth doing. But again, blue block 3, sadly not a nice card in addition to itself. That would be a bit silly if it was. And necessary for that endgame in those Frost Hex matchups. So once again, just makes the cut in every matchup pretty happily. Insidious Chill, this card is slowly becoming, in my opinion, the most important card in the deck. And again, cards of block 2 have to be to make the cut in every matchup. Chill just is never bad. It just isn't. In the aggro matchups, if you take damage to set these things up, you can slowly turn around the game with a Freezing Point or an Ice Vein or an Encase even fuse to trigger multiple of these and just take your opponent's turn away. It's so hard for most people to keep multiple cards through multiple chills, and at that point you don't have to block as much, and then you're keeping more cards every turn, which means it's even easier to fuse your chills and trigger them again. And in the combo matchups, this is the thing that's going to let you strip your opponent's hand away to make sure they can't pay for arcane damage dealt by Frostbites at the end of the turn from the Frost Hexes. It just continues to impress me, and I think it is the most important card about how the deck is currently built. And you should run it in every matchup, no doubt. It's one of the few cards in the deck you're like willing to take damage to get on the board. In a situation where we're trying to keep 2 cards most turns, you know, block strategically, and then either Moon or Coronet and Arsenal a fresh card, it plays so well into those play patterns on turns where you're happy to take damage to play it out. Or you can block well and Arsenal this and then play it out of your arsenal in their turn and block with more cards. There's a lot of ways to be very flexible with Chill. But it's definitely the card alongside, Aether Ice Vein in a lot of matchups that you're just kind of happy to take some damage to play. And I love it to bits. It's definitely the most important part of the deck now, in my opinion. And then last but not least in the core here, you have Nourishing Emptiness. I am surprised by the amount of Icelanders I've seen no longer playing Nourishing Emptiness, but I do understand. We kind of talked in brief before about how the card just isn't as good as it once was. It's easy for people to, Oldhim players still have Staunch Response Blue in their deck. Crown of Seeds exists. Oasis Respite exists. Maybe the Dromai players are just having to turn over Crown of Providence and Flamescale Furnace against you because they don't have any other armor options. It's pretty easy for Nourishing Emptiness to be blocked by a number of folks. But for the most part, I still find that it's a popper in matchups where that matters. And if you earn armor in most of those matchups, you're actually kind of happy about it. Like Fai, for example, if they block with Mask of Momentum or Mask of the Pouncing Link Steel, I think that's a good trade for me anyway. And the high roll potential on Nourishing Emptiness is just so high. When you do draw up to 5, I mean, the card just pays for itself in spades. At the very worst, it still blocks 3 when you want to block with it as well. Sometimes on the first turn of the game, this thing just feels like cheating if your opponent isn't able to deal with it because they're wearing too much Arcane Barrier. I do still think it's worth it, but I am willing to concede that exploring the idea of playing Command & Conquers, playing, maybe Erase Faces and stuff, much like other Iyslander aficionados like Ethnic Smoke kind of champion, I'm on board with exploring those ideas in the future because Emptiness isn't the all-star that it once was. That being said, if I thought it was so bad that I should play attacks, I would have done so. I do still think it's better than those options currently, in my opinion, just because when it does go off, it wins games all by itself, and it's just a very, very difficult to handle card. As more people begin to respect Iyslander, the more people respect you and they bring AB3, AB4, the better Nourishing Emptiness gets because it's harder for them to handle. So, big fan of the Emptiness. So, we're going to look at the equipment suite here. Equipment this time is exactly the same as last time except for one noticeable change. We've gained a Nullrune Hood. Nullrune Hood has become kind of a card I want as a mirror breaker. I was very much looking to have one dedicated slot to help me in the Iyslander mirror, which I played twice over the course of the event. And I was close to playing Exposed to the Elements, but I decided to go with Nullrune Hood instead. Exposed, very good at taking your opponent's Stormstriders or Constellus away, which is very, very strong in the mirror match, as you might be able to imagine, should you be able to strip their hand away with Chills first, and then set up that Exposed. But I wanted something a little more universal, and then I decided I wanted access to AB5. This was mostly for opposing red Freezing Points, red Ice Bolts, red Aether Ice Veins, so I could block those out in their entirety instead of leaking damage on turns where I'm trying to stop my opponent from having tempo. But more importantly, I found that it let me be more aggressive with my Stormstriders. I found when I was playing the mirror before Leal that I had to hold on to my Stormstriders to make sure I could prevent my opponent from tempoing me out and have enough AB available, which was kind of a detriment sometimes. I drew hands that I wanted to Striders and didn't feel like I could. And the Nullrune Hood goes some way to fixing that, because it means that when you pop your Striders, you still have access to AB3, which is going to prevent most of the impactful non-yellow Ice Vein plus effects in the matchup, which I think helps a fair bit, as opposed to getting like dimed buying cases and similar once you've popped your Striders. So really big fan of the Nullrune Hood. it did some good work for me this weekend, and I'll probably play it again currently as things stand. Otherwise, main core armor in most matchups, which we'll see when we go through sideboarding, remains exactly the same. Coronet Peak, Findle Spring Tunic, Ironhide Gauntlet, Storm Striders. The Alluvian Castellus is very much here for Visceri and Wizard Mirrors. It single-handedly wins you those matchups. It's insanely strong, and you need it for those matchups more than anything else. And Metacarpus Node, while it does get played against Wizard as well, mostly here for Briar, so that you can still have access to your Tunic in that matchup, which is very important to be able to play your cards on time and efficiently. But you need access to AB1 to be able to kind of shut down Rune Chance, Rosetta Thorn, especially once your shoes have been blown. And sometimes you will push final damage against Briar with Metacarpus Node 2. Something you definitely want to keep in mind. It's also here for Dromai. Metacarpus Node, very, very good at helping you take out Thermai. If you need to get it off the table with a blue or one of the weaker red spells, should you have failed to draw a decent answer to it. And also just really good, again, at preventing Burn Them All, Azalea, this kind of stuff, from leaking through arcane damage, while finally being able to burst your attacks over to their available AB at the end of the game, so you can squeak in that final bit of damage as well. So a really important card in that matchup. Very happy with the armor suite, wouldn't change a thing. 8 slots seems fine by me. And then we get onto the sideboard, the real meat and potatoes of this version of Iyslander. So these are the cards that you do not start in every matchup, and come in a variety of different matchups. And we're going to go through those matchups in a bit, so don't panic if that's what you're here for. I'm going to take this opportunity actually real quick to mention that I'm going to be writing an article about this deck as well. I work with a lovely company called DotGG. We are a gaming organisation at www.dotgg.gg. Will be in the description box below as well, and they've politely asked me to write you guys an article about the play patterns of this deck and some more information that maybe I miss in this video. So that's going to be coming in the next few days, and I would really appreciate it if you go and check that out when it goes live. I'll be sharing it on social media and stuff, and hopefully that written piece will be of use to you guys too, fingers crossed. So yeah, lots of sideboard options here. Again, you're looking for 18 of these in every matchup, and you'll understand that sometimes we are making choices based on the fact we need more blues, or based on the fact we need more reds, and sometimes we're making choices because the card is just the best thing we can be doing in the matchup, and it's here very specifically for something in particular. So we'll start with Arctic Incarceration. Arctic Incarceration, a blue that is very powerful in the Frost Hex matchups. You're going to be pitching it to the bottom in a lot of spaces so that it lines up alongside those final turns. And then you're going to look to basically have this card deal 6 arcane. It generates 2 Frostbites by itself, so if you've got 3 hexes in play, that is a 0-cost blue that deals 6. And that's a really, really powerful effect in those final turns of the game. So you'll play it in a lot of those matchups. It blocking 2 does keep it from being a 3-of in a lot of more aggressive matchups. But it is not a bad tempo tool there. It's a 0 that lets you turn on Waning Moon very quickly. And sometimes 2 Frostbites can end a turn from your aggro opponent if you can time it correctly. So not the worst card in those matchups. Often not a 3-of in spots where we bring it in. It often comes in some of the aggro matchups because we need to up our blue count just a little bit. And the card is like not embarrassing in those spots. But we never play 3 there, as you'll see. It's mostly for the more controlling matchups to be able to have that extra burst from Frostbites in the endgame. We're up to 3 Blizzard. We were on 2 in Leal. I'm up to 3 now. I kind of found myself, after some of the other changes I made to respect Dromai and Oldhim, a little short on the anti-aggro tools. I was finding the Fai Matchup really difficult, actually, which was a change of pace from where I was going into Leal. So this was more of a concession to that. I thought I was better off having another tool for those spots. Blizzard's still not the best card, in my opinion, against like Briar and Visceri. The decks are very heavy on blues, and it gets a bit worse into the Fai lists that are playing like 6 Belittles, because they also just have a million blues, which makes it very easy to pay their way through this. But you'll find you're often trying to tag team it alongside a card from your arsenal to generate another Frostbite, so you're effectively taxing them 4 resources, not just 3. And that gets the job done a lot of the time. Beyond that, it's a blue ice card. Just keep in mind it does, of course, not trigger your Waning Moon as it is an instant and not a non-attack action. So you'll see when we play blues to fill up our blue count in matchups like, Kano, Iyslander, where we just want as many blues to pay for AB as we can. We don't play Blizzard because it's the blue that doesn't trigger Waning Moon, which means it's often the odd one out in those spots. Brain Freeze is still a card that I'm like super impressed by. I think its stock is falling off a bit. We're finding obviously less Briar, well, not so much less Fai anymore. UK Nationals was full of Fai, but less Visceri, less Briar, less Runeblades. And this card definitely shone in those matchups, taking away Revel in Runeblood in response to Spellbound Creepers, taking away Bramble Sparks, taking away Lightning Surges, like all kinds of cards that you really don't want to be on the other end of if you can help it. While being a blue block 3 that fuses, so you can even fuse this thing from your arsenal to trigger your Insidious Chills, which is a great little tempo play. I think the card's still great. Putting Phoenix Flames on top of your opponent's library, putting the Minnowism back on top of your opponent's library after they belittle for it. It does a lot of very powerful things in the aggro matchups, and I think it's a fantastic tool there. And it being a blue block 3 means it often makes the cut against Guardian 2 just in that slot as I need another blue that blocks 3, and that's all I want it to do. And sometimes it can fuse cheaply for me to trigger Insidious Chills in spots where I need it to. So Brain Freeze, yeah, I think it's still very much worth playing. It's definitely one of those cards you can look to knock down in numbers if suddenly there is just no Runeblade. If there is actually no Briar or Visceri, this card gets a fair bit worse. 2 Epots, same as before. The Epots here, very much for the Guardian matchups. I think that Wizard, I believe I played them against Wizard as well. That you need that extra energy burst on those Ice Eternal turns. You very much want to be able to make that thing as large as you possibly can when going for your Frost Hex kill. And you can find a lot of weird spots in the Wizard matchup, for example. This just pays for a Waning Moon, or pays for AB2 to help you keep a card to push back against your opponent. Very, very powerful. I've definitely thought about going down to 1, but I find if I play 1 Epot, I don't find it sometimes until very, very late into the Guardian matchups. And as Guardians get faster, that's kind of worse, because I guess we'll address it at this point here. With Bravo and Oldhim getting more aggressive fundamentally in their nature, way more reds, Red Matchup Grandes, Red Snow Unders, Glacial Footsteps, these big dominated attacks that are very, very hard to block. You don't get to set up the perfect kill anymore. You don't get to do the whole pitch stack Weather Vanes and dig up your potions, play all your pieces, get all 3 Frost Hexes, kill for 35. It just doesn't. You don't tend to get there. You don't have enough life to play with all these dominated attacks just not being able to be blocked how you want them to. And that can mean you have to go for imperfect kills a lot of the time, where you're tempoing with Waning Moon. Of course, the more aggressive an Oldhim player is, the less resources they have spare when they attack you, which means the Waning Moon can chip in for damage way more easily, and they're not able to prevent it. To get them into a point where you can kill them with 2 Frost Hexes, or maybe you can kill them with only 1 Insidious Chill, or so on and so forth. So you can go for a big burst damage turn with less pieces in play. It's actually a really good example of this in the feature match I had during Nationals. I'm actually going to be editing that and putting it up on my channel too. From the guys over at Armory Knights who streamed the event. You should go check them out too if you haven't. A really sweet match against Oldhim where that kind of mentality comes into play. And I highly recommend checking out that match when it goes up if you're interested in that. But as a result of that kind of play pattern, I find that I just kind of need an energy potion. Like, you have to have one during the game somewhere to be able to kind of leverage things. And if you only play 1, sometimes you don't find it until it's too late. So I think 2 is still the magic number, and I intend on staying there. But I could see 1 being playable at some point in the future. Fate Foreseen, Sink Below, still cards that I am very high on. Again, a lot of your play patterns in most matchups are going to be blocking with 2 cards and keeping 2 cards. And in that world, you want those 2 cards to block 4 as much as you can. And that means these 0-cost block 4s are just the best thing you can be doing. Fate Foreseen often going to set up the top of your deck to help you find pieces you need in Frost Hex matchups, lets you get rid of stuff you don't want to get closer to those hexes, chills, etc. And Sink Below kind of lets you cheat a little in spots where you don't want to play that many reds in your deck. Because it means you can have some redundancy. If you draw a 2-red hand in a spot where you really can't afford to, 3-red hand in a spot where you can't afford to, Sink Below can turn one of those into a blue, so you can keep that play pattern of Coronet Arsenal going in a hand that might have otherwise failed to do so, which makes it very, very strong in that regard too. Still a big fan of both of these cards. I've toyed around with the idea of playing Yellow Oasis Respite or Sigil of Solace in the Fate-Foreseen slot to be better into Oakenol, better into Dominate. These are things I look to explore more in the future, but haven't quite got there yet. I do currently still prefer Fate-Foreseen and Sink Below and intend on staying there for a hot second. The third Freezing Point finds itself in the sideboard. You do still want this card in those more controlling matchups. You want it in matchups like Dromai and the Mirror, where big damage spells matter. And you do want it against the Guardians when you're fusing it off of Stormstriders for massive damage, or even just playing it as a 6 or 7 damage effect in your own turn. It is the best on-rate card for those matchups, and you want the third one, so you will definitely be playing it there. Yellow Fyendal's Fighting Spirits. This is a controversial one for a lot of folks in the Iyslander community. A lot of people just prefer to be playing Command and Conquer or Race Face or some other 6 in this slot now, because you want more flexibility. You want the card to be better in matchups that aren't just Dromai. And I totally understand that. I think for me, the sad truth is I want all my reds to be good into my Dromai opponent having armor, because I expect them to still have some armor. So Command and Conquer is a little lackluster outside of being a popper. And I think Command and Conquer doesn't really fit my play pattern when it comes to other matchups like Boltyn or Lexi or Fai or even Briar, much like it does with people like Ethic Smoke's list who constantly score 3 cards or an arsenal and 6 damage from their Command and Conquers, which makes that card fantastic. But I find it hard to fit into my play patterns in most matchups, and I think it's just an inferior popper. So I came to the decision that I still wanted a popper in the list. I wanted to be able to go up to 4 against Dromai in particular. So I wanted 3 in my board somewhere, and I still think Fighting Spirit is the best popper for this deck by a lot. Not only because it gains you life while doing the thing, it can punch the dragons, it can pop the dragons and gain you life in the process, but it's a yellow. And it being yellow means it pitches to Waning Moon, which none of the other 6s that you're interested in playing do. So I made that concession. I'm still happy playing Fighting Spirit for just Dromai and nobody else. But I know a lot of people are going to want this slot to be more flexible, and they want to play CNC, they want to play a Race Face, and that's okay. I understand that, and it's something you can definitely explore. Hypothermia, this card's stock has gone through the roof. It's just one of the best ice auras you can play. Again, blue ice card, 0 cost to play out of the arsenal to trigger Waning Moon. Sadly, only blocks 2, but that's probably for the best. With an uptick of decks like Kodachi Fai, we saw an awful lot of Kodachi Fai in the UK Nationals. This card just increases in stock. Really good against Visceri on those Movrian Skies turns. Fantastic against Briar when they're relying on Embodiment of Lightnings or Snapdragon Scalers to really push damage during the turn. It just gets better and better. It's a blue you often play in matchups like Iyslander and Kano too, just because it does pitch to prevent Arcane and is a 0 cost non-attack action to turn on Waning Moon, which does come up when you need to be able to do that on most turn cycles. Hypothermia even finding itself reasonable against the Oldhim lists these days. They're playing a lot of Zealous Beltings and Enlightened Strikes, and it can just prevent upwards of 6 damage for 1 card, which is an insane rate. We've also seen Rhinar having an uptick over in Canadian Nationals, which is incredible. I would love for Rhinar to be a good deck. That's a very nice change of pace. And Hypothermia, even really good into that matchup, assuming they are playing Bloodbrush Bellow or the Mandible Claws. And it's really good at preventing like upwards of 6 damage on those turns in that matchup too. So can't see myself playing any less than 3 Hypothermia anytime soon. Absolutely stellar piece of card. We go on to Red Ice Bolt. Red Ice Bolt is not a card I like. I do think, for the most part, it's a role player, and you should be looking to include it in your deck if you're trying to improve certain matchups. This mostly came about as my concession to Dromai. I needed more ways alongside Yellow Ice Veins to kill a Thermai. I needed more ways to race. I want my reds to be able to just go face when I going early. I just want to be the aggro deck. I just want to dump tall red arcane into them as much as I can. And Ice Bolt is the other best on-rate red that's an ice card to play alongside everything else that you're doing. So it makes the cut for that reason. There are other matchups it's good in. It's a really solid haymaker in the mirror. If they're not playing AB5, you just get to leak damage alongside your Waning Moon. I play into matchups where I don't want my defensive tools, where I can afford to play some more reds. I don't want Fate Foreseens, I don't want Sink Belows, and I've got space. I can play Ice Bolts, I can play more red damage, and that means the game is going to be more tempo orientated, and I can do larger chunks of damage. And that's really cool. That's a very solid inclusion for the deck. It, of course, blocks 3 in a pinch, much like the cards we want to play. So I think it's worth having right now. I do think it's the kind of card that I would be willing to get rid of again if Dromai is not a popular deck and I don't need to worry about it and I just want to concede that that matchup is terrible. But for now, I like having my options available to me, and it does come in other matchups. It's more flexible than the Fighting Spirit. So yeah, absolutely, 100% I would play a good chunk of Ice Bolt. And then last but not least, Oasis Respite. This card is still a mistake. What an absolute stain of a card. It just gets better and better. It's not bad against anyone, but it only starts in the sideboard because I don't play it into Dromai. As we talk about in the Dromai section there just now, we really want to be all on the tall red arcane, all the damage as quickly as possible. So you want to make sure you're playing none of your defensive tools. You don't play any Fate Foreseens, any Sink Belows, any Oasis Respites, because you can't afford to draw blanks, especially not red blanks in that matchup, or you just don't do enough damage fast enough. So that's why it's in the board. It starts in nearly every other matchup as far as I can remember. It, again, just on rate is so absurd. 1 for 5 block is the way to look at it in a lot of cases, with the life being gained nearly always. It prevents a Rosetta Thorn all by itself. It somehow gets around Dominates and protects you from Oakenolds and Glacial Footsteps, and the card is just absolutely bananas. And I think it's my current pick alongside Belittle for the best card in the game that is a generic. I highly recommend playing more Oasis Respites in your decks. I think the thing is just a mistake, and I will not be cutting any red ones from my deck anytime soon, to the point where I'm actively willing to try and play yellows before you know it. So yeah, I highly recommend casting more copies of Oasis Respite. So this is the deck list. Again, it is available in the description below. If that's all you want to get it onto Talishar and start playing it for yourself, there it is. If you want more details, though, that I can help you with, we're going to start looking at some of the matchups. As you see, my version of this deck has every sideboard plan built in. So if you're not sure how I would be boarding in these matchups, it's all in the link. You can go and get the sideboard guide and play it for yourself completely free of charge. All I do ask, guys, I know it sounds like I'm being a bit of a pluggy content creator, but this is a lot of work, obviously. I care about Iyslander very dearly, and I've put a lot of time into it. So if you are wanting to support what I've been doing here, once again, please just consider chucking a subscription. Maybe check out .gg, where this article's going to be. Maybe follow me on Twitter, HowlingMines. Come and say hi, come and chat in Discord. Just become part of the Fab community with me. That'd be great. As I kind of want to do this content creation thing properly again. And yeah, I guess that's enough of that. So yeah, okay, let's take a look at these one at a time. I'm going to explore doing this in picture view, and then I'm going to show you it in matchup view as well, I think, just to kind of show the list off, I suppose. I'm not necessarily sure how the best way to do this is, because the formatting on the pictures is just kind of weird. So yeah, you know what, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and highlight to you the cards that don't go in the deck in each matchup, so you know what should still be in your deck box. And then I'll talk about some of the cards you boarded in and why they're good. Maybe that's the best way of doing this. So cards that don't come in against Dorinthea. We're looking at Dory. You should have Nolrun Hood, Metacarpus Node, Alolan Castellus, Ice Bolts, Fighting Spirits, Freezing Point, Energy Potions, and Arctic Incarcerations in your sideboard. They should not make the cut. Your Armor Suite, normal stock Armor Suite. Cards that come in this matchup, Sink Below, Oasis Respite. Obviously, just you are trying to stop the Dory player from swinging their sword twice. Defense reactions are notoriously insane against Dory. Oasis Respite is even better than that because it doesn't count as blocking as a card from your hand. So unsurprisingly, these cards are insane in the matchup. Hypothermia just stops the second sword swing dead. Don't have to worry about blocking the second one if they can't pay for some way around this, generate an extra action point or something, it just stops the sword having go again. So it's very, very good at that. Fate Foreseen, just another defense reaction, completely bananas against Dori. It's just exactly what you want. Block as efficiently as you can, and be able to play around those buffs from hand when they're buffing Dawnblades, try and stop it from hitting you. And then, last but not least, we've got Blizzard and Brain Freeze as the cards that come in this matchup. Otherwise, Blizzard, very much the same thing we've just talked about. All these tools you're bringing in are designed to try and shut down that second swing, and make the Dori player have to go tall into you if they want to present damage. It's hard for Dori players to pay for Blizzard and attack again and prevent you from dealing chunks of arcane damage with Waning Moon, which is exactly what you want to do with a card like Blizzard. Just kind of shut down that second go again attack. Brain Freeze, not an all-star in this matchup by any stretch. Very good at taking things like Glint the Quicksilver, maybe even like double, is it double? No, it's not double strike. Slice and Dice and other zero-cost buff reactions before the attack reaction window where they can be played. But you can only take actions. You can't take attack reactions, which is the important part. So it's going to be things like Second Swing, I guess, style effects. Not that you can take Second Swing. But things that cost 0 that they were looking to play on the second swing of the Dawnblade. Or, beforehand, in which case. So, yeah, Glint not a good example. I shouldn't have said that. But yeah, there are a few targets for Brain Freeze that come up periodically, but it's mostly in the deck as a blue block 3, and filling in that slot, and a 0-cost non-attack action that could trigger Waning Moon on the cheap, and can also fuse on the cheap, because Insidious Chill and Amulet of Ice are very, very strong cards against Dori, as you just take their options away. It stops them being able to pump the Dawnblade, or have various ways of tricking you into blocking incorrectly. So that's where we want to be against Dori. Visceri, so you're going to be looking at having the following in your deck box if you're playing against Vis. Nolran Hood, Metacarpus Node, Fiendil's Spring Tunic, 3 Ice Bolts, 3 Fighting Spirits, 3 Fate Foreseens, 2 Epots, and a single copy of Arctic Incarceration. So I'll start on Arctic just because it's kind of weird that we're playing 2, and it's going to be the one that we get the most questions for. This is a blue count consideration. The changes I've made to this list unfortunately mean that I'm kind of away from my steadfast rule in the last video. We do have to go below 41 blues now. We're playing a yellow. That's mostly why. Yellow Aether Ice Vein has to take the slot of a blue in the deck, which means your blue count is just lower than it was in my old list, and I do not like that. So there are a number of matchups you'll see where we're playing the least bad blue to kind of top that number up and help us kind of finish that thing off. So yeah, we're on 2 Arctics in that spot. Arctic, definitely not an all-star in the matchup by any stretch, but 2 Frostbites can stop a Rosetta Thorn swing, and it does indeed pitch for 3, is an ice card to fuse with, and it's a 0-cost non-attack action to trigger Waning Moon, so it does get the nod in that spot. In terms of cards that we're happy about, Sink Below, Oasis Respite, once again, these cards are just absolutely stellar in the more aggressive matchups. I'm going to stop explaining Oasis Respite because I just think it's absurd into nearly everybody. But Sink Below, really good here at turning off certain hit triggers like Rika Corruption, Consuming Volition, that you really don't want to be interrupting your hand. Really good at blunting attacks while your blues take care of Nolrun, take care of Arcane, I should say, via your Arcane Barrier, to turn on Constellus. So it's really good at just kind of trading 1-for-1 on cards. Hypothermia, very, very strong in the face of things, again, like Movrian Skies. Do keep in mind that your Visceri opponent can circumvent this with Spellbound Creepers, so you want to be careful when you extend it to make sure you don't play it for no reason. But it does basically add 2 extra resources to their turn in that spot because of the Frostbite and the Spellbound Creepers, so can often sometimes still be worth it. Just be careful where you're putting it. But very, very good at shutting a turn down after Movrian Skies, stopping that Thorn Swing, stopping the Rune Chants coming in with it. Very, very strong. Core is all here, so we're looking at the other options we bring in this matchup. We have the 3rd Freezing Point. Should mention the 3rd Freezing Point in this matchup. Weird to bring this in a more aggressive matchup. The truth is we were 1 card short in the plan that I wanted to play in the matchup anyway, which means this fills that slot. But also, this is one of the matchups where you can aggressively, not that even you can, you kind of do need to aggressively Storm Striders towards the end of the game and not earlier. I explained this in the last video, but Visceri is kind of all about keeping tempo. You want to keep life totals as close to each other as possible, because a Luvin Constellus is going to be dealing 1.5 damage for every 1 damage it prevents, which means you're going to be winning that race a lot of the time with free Waning Moon activations. And if you can keep yourself equal, 8 to 10 life each, when they extend to kill you on that final turn of the game, you're going to be able to Storm Striders and kill them in response when they have no resources available to stop you. And that means that I want the red in this matchup. I want another way of guaranteeing, you're going to find yourself blocking with a number of reds in a matchup like Visceri. So making sure I have a couple I can pitch stack to the bottom, or will just be at the bottom for me, is very important. So I like having the extra freezing point, and I'm not worried about the fact it's a bit awkward in this particular aggro matchup. Blizzard, again, really strong here. A little worse against Visceri just because of how many blues they play. But again, we're just looking for these effects that try and stop the Thorn coming on the end, because that's going to block you for a minimum of 4 damage, and if not, significantly more from the rune chance that would normally come alongside it, which means it makes the cut. And then last but not least, Brain Freeze. Brain Freeze, very much in the deck for a matchup like this, takes away Become the Arknight, takes away Revel in Runeblood, takes away Minnowisms in the Belittle list, takes away all kinds of zeros, Movrian Skies. You ever taken away your opponent's Movrian Skies? It's pretty good. It's very hard for him to have a turn afterwards if they didn't lead on it. Card's fantastic in the matchup, and again, it's just a blue block 3, so definitely something you want access to in this matchup. Rhinar. Rhinar matchup I don't have all that much experience with, in fairness. I've played it twice, I believe, since I started playing Iyslander. So a lot of this is theory, so please do keep that in mind once you take a look. Cards you do not want to be playing. Nora and Hood, Metacarpus Node, Luvin Constellus. No Red Ice Bolts, no Fighting Spirits, no Arctic Incarcerations, no Epots, and no third Freezing Point. This means that we are once again on the full suite of defense reactions. FaBTCG, Oasis, Respite, Sink Below. These obviously can get intimidated out of your hand, but having these in Arsenal against Rhinar is solid. It's going to keep you safe from those silly barraging beatdown turns. So getting them intimidated away and arsenaling them is not the end of the world. If they intimidate 2 cards and it's a blue and a defense reaction, you will just Coronet Peak and Arsenal defense reaction, and that's an okay turn. After blocking with 2 other cards. It's just your best way of surviving the oncoming damage. The big turns that Rhinar has can be quite scary. So you want to be just suited up and ready to tackle those, in my opinion. Hypothermia here, very much for Claws and Bloodrush Bellows. We kind of discussed that a little briefly earlier on when we were talking about it in the deck. And then we look at the other options we have here in the form of Blizzard and Brain Freeze. Blizzard, Brain Freeze are cards that I'm just very happy to have in the more aggressive matchups. Blizzard, again, kind of awkward on non-Claws, non-Bloodrush Bellow turns, but you are happy to just pitch it to Coronet Peak if that's the case. But it's just so good on those turns that it does in fact make the cut. You need to be able to turn those Blood Rush turns off. If they happen and you don't interact and they hit you, you're going to take a lot of damage. You're going to take a lot of damage. So being able to turn those things off, very much what I'm all about. Brain Freeze, really good at sniping, barraging beatdowns, and similar zero-cost effects to kind of stop you getting your hand intimidated away. Also a cheap way of turning on Waning Moon in this matchup, so I do think it is worth playing for that reason. So we're on the full defensive suite against Rhinar alongside your core. Oldhim. Oldhim, very much a Frost Hex matchup. We've talked about this in detail in the past. So the cards you're looking to not have in your deck: Norin Hood, Metacarpus Node, Looming Constellus, Hypothermias, Fighting Spirits, Blizzards, and Ice Bolts. Now, there are some considerations for 2 of these cards. I could definitely see Hypothermia and Ice Bolt being reasonable into Oldhim, depending on what your exact plan is. Ice Bolt's going to let you do that tempo race to set up an imperfect kill a lot better, if you can find space to get it in. Hypothermia are obviously really good into Enlightened Strike, Zealous Belting style game plans of Oldhim. If you know what your opponent is doing, and you know the version of Oldhim they're on, I think these are considerations you can make, and you can maybe switch some cards we can talk over bringing in to make that better, and maybe play that out a bit better. But this is my stock version against all Oldhims in the dark, assuming I don't know what they're doing, be it Fatigue or Aggro, because it lets me hedge best against both and plays the important cards against both. So we'll talk briefly about maybe what you could change these for if you know the type of Oldhim you're against in a moment, but this is where we are. Normal equipment suite, again, full chunk of defense reactions. Fate Foreseen, Sink Below, Oasis Respite, just completely insane in this matchup for stopping dominated damage to the best of your ability, or being able to block as much damage as you can if you can only block with 1 card. Third Freezing Point, again, important in the Frost Hex matchups. Striders for 6, 7, Being able to push damage while you're setting up those Frost Hexes, good card. Otherwise, just blocks 3 for you, so definitely want the third one here. Brain Freeze, this is a blue block 3. This is one of the cards I could definitely see myself changing for Ice Bolt or Incarceration. Our blue count in this matchup is only 38, unfortunately. So you really kind of can't cut this for a red, I don't think, if I'm being completely honest. So Ice Bolt, probably not enough. If you wanted to play the Ice Bolts, you'd probably have to cut something else red, which is kind of where I'm struggling to find space for them, in my opinion. That's kind of why they don't end up making the cut instead of the blue. But I can definitely see you playing like maybe Hypothermia over this if you wanted to have access to it against the more aggressive versions. And the same to be said really about Arctic Incarceration. I think you could play Hypothermia over this too if you think that they're on aggro Oldhim, because you're not going to get back to that pitch stack to be able to do 6 damage off of 3 hexes if they're smashing you with huge red attacks. So good chance you can play Hypothermia instead of this in this matchup if you know they are aggressive and you don't need that endgame burst. If you wanted to play the Ice Bolts, I can see you maybe playing them over in case. I do think I prefer to be able to keep decent 2-card hands against Oldhim for the most part, especially on turns where you get dominated. So I'm going to choose to play the Incases for now. But if all you care about is raw damage, so that you're able to actually throw something back into Oldhim when they're being aggressive, I could see Ice Bolt there instead. But for the most part, I think you just don't want that many reds in this matchup because you're looking to Frost Hex, Ice Eternal kill here, even if it is an imperfect version of that kill. And reds are a liability in that world, so I don't think you want to prioritize any red damage over just your Fate Foreseen, Sink Below's, Oasis Respites, because those cards are just insane in this matchup. Lexi. Again, hard to know exactly what version of Lexi you'll be against, be it Lightning, Ice, Death Dealer, Voltaire. So we're going to have to hedge our bets here. None of the arcane-based equipment, no Ice Bolts, no Fighting Spirits, no third Freezing Point. 3 Fate Foreseens, 2 Epots, and an Arctic Incarceration. So again, defense reactions here, only the Sink Below and Oasis Respite. We're not playing the Fate Foreseens against Lexi for mostly space and colour reasons. I've got no other cards I would rather play less than Fate Foreseen, and I need to keep that blue count chunky. As then, if we take a look once again, we're on 41 in this matchup, which is kind of where I want to be in every matchup where possible. I want to have the best opportunity to have like 80+% or 98% chance of drawing 2 or more blues in my hand. This is the kind of number that I really want to hit in a lot of spots where possible. So going to prioritize blues in spots where I can. And I think most of the blues we have are pretty good in this matchup, so they make the cut over the Fate Foreseens, but we are still playing our Sinks and our Respites. Hypothermia, very much insane, I should say, against the more Voltaire versions of Lexi, so you can stop those extra arrows coming in. Unfortunately, kind of bad against the Death Dealer Snapshot versions of Lexi, because they kind of cheat by making other action points, but the card definitely good enough to play in the dark if you know nothing about the Lexi opponent that you're playing against. Just because it stops those turns going wide. Once again, exactly what you want to be doing in these spots. Again, we're filling up the blue count with Arctic Incarceration. Not at its best in this matchup, but perfectly fine to disrupt if you know your opponent's trying to get off on a resource light hand, load a second arrow and fire it with no resources floating, and try and keep a card for Arsenal maybe. So really good at kind of just playing a little bit of cheap disruption towards the end of the game. So it makes the cut in that spot as the blue ice card that fills up our blue count. We are then playing our Blizzards and our Brain Freezers. Again, we expect this matchup to be quite aggressive from our opponents. They should be pretty good at going wide, and these cards are very, very good when they're going wide. Taking away 0-cost arrows in response to Voltaire is really, really funny. And I highly recommend doing it if you get the chance. Admittedly, this list much worse into like Go Tall Lexi. Not that I see very much of that, but we do have a known Go Tall Lexi aficionado in the UK. And this is a much harder matchup this way, because you're very much planning for them to go wide with Voltaire, more than you are go tall with Seek and Destroy or Read the Glide Path style bonuses, or even like Weave Ice Domination. You're going to want Fate Foreseens if you know that's happening. I would definitely consider hacking back on the blues to play Fate Foreseen if you know that your opponent is going to be doing the whole, Weave Ice Dominate style strategy. But even that's kind of soft to being caught out by Dreadbore or similar effects, so who knows. I like where I am currently in the Lexi matchup for the most part. I've just realised we're on 59 in this matchup. Am I missing a card? Yeah, I think I'm supposed to be on all the Arctics in this matchup. Am I 3-6? What are my numbers again? Sorry, guys. This is my bad. I just realised I'm a card short. No, I should be on the freezing point here, I think, by the looks of it. As I'm only on 15 reds. So let me just adjust that real quick for folks that are going to care about that kind of thing, because that makes me feel a bit silly. So let's matchups, Lexi Matchup, and go grab the other freezing point to be in the deck. My apologies for that. Yeah, so the extra red is fine in this spot because we're quite light otherwise. Up the blue count to 41, which is more than enough. Everything else still stands, regardless of the fact we were randomly a card short. Levia. Levia, again, very much like Rhinar, a matchup that I don't have all that much experience with very much a theory-crafted matchup. And as a result, the sideboarding is practically exactly the same as Rhinar. I believe it is, in fact, exactly the same card for card. No null rune equipment, no ice pots, no fighting spirits, no freezing point, no e-pots, no arctic incarcerations. You want all defense reactions as best you can, stop those big incoming attacks. Basically the only thing Brute's good at, right? Large attacks. And you want hypothermias and blizzards for those mandible claw, blood rush, bellow, go wide turns that those brute decks are capable of. Brain freeze here, a few less targets, but a lot of the Levias I've played against are still just on a pile of barraging beatdowns, and the best target means that it's still there. So definitely happy to do that, and at the very worst, it is a blue block 3. So again, not a matchup I've played very much, unfortunately, just because it's not overly popular right now. But a lot of the theory we apply to Rhinar very much still makes sense against Levia, so very, very similar sideboard. Katsu, a deck where we are not playing Norrune, Ice Bolts, Fighting Spirits. Yeah, you're looking at, yeah, it's a very, very similar sideboard plan here into Katsu, somewhat unsurprisingly. It's another aggro deck, so a lot of the cards you would expect us to be playing against the aggro decks are what is currently in our deck. All the defense reactions, hypothermia, your blizzards, your brain freezes. Once again, just a selection of cards that you are very, very happy to have against the more aggressively sided decks. Katsu, just stop those massive momentum triggers, stop relevant Katsu hit triggers where you can to stop combo lines from coming off, and you should be more than fine. It's a very, very reasonable matchup. You've got a lot of good tools for it, and they very much struggle to do much barring swing Kodachis in the face of big insidious chill turns. More importantly, Hypothermia laughs at Kodachis. You will never see a Katsu player more embarrassed than when they start their turn on a Kodachi. You block it if you want or don't, and then play a Hypothermia on resolution, and suddenly their turn has ended. And yeah, that's pretty good, somewhat unsurprisingly. So, Kano, a matchup where we are very much just trying to increase that blue count and have relevant damage. So the cards that don't end up in your board are actually 3 of your normal ones, because you are on AB5 in this matchup, courtesy of Norrune Hood. You will never activate Coronet Peak anyway. No Sinks, no Fates, no Fighting Spirits, no Blizzards. Blizzard, the one that doesn't make the cut as a blue because it is not a non-attack action to trigger Waning Moon. Beyond that, we are playing our Oasis Respites because, again, this just prevents arcane damage for some reason. The card is completely and utterly absurd. Red Ice Bolt makes the cut because we want to be able to push damage. The longer the game goes, the worse it is for us, really. If we want to let Kano set up those big Aether Wildfire turns, we're going to struggle to pay for everything to keep damage off of our face. And we really do kind of want to save our Oasis Respites for those Aether Wildfires where possible. Sitting an Oasis Respite in your arsenal is not the worst idea, but it does make it very hard to activate Waning Moon in your opponent's turn, so do keep that in mind. Hypothermia, just a blue, literally just a blue that can trigger Waning Moon in this matchup more than it is anything else. Energy Potion, fantastic at letting you have extra resources to pay for AB, maybe make one of your attacks larger, courtesy of Metacarpus Node. 0 cost non-attack action for triggering Waning Moon. Does all the things you would expect an E-Pot to be able to do in the Wizard Mirror. So definitely want them here. And then once again, just loading up on the blues. We've got the Arctics and the Brain Freezes. Brain Freeze, again, practically irrelevant in this matchup. You can do a really cool thing in some like stupid Ragamuffins hat, Potion of Deja Vu spots where you can sometimes snipe the Blazing Aether. It doesn't come up very often, but when it does, boy golly is it funny. But the sad truth is most of the cards you care about from Kano come from the top of their deck. and it makes it kind of hard to brain freeze them away. So very much just the blue in this matchup. Arctic Incarceration, a bit better, definitely the blue of choice given the chance. Because you don't care what it blocks, and the disruption can sometimes be relevant. Making your opponent's Kano ability, cost 5, can sometimes make their turns very, very small. Or just making a spell they hit off Kano very hard to cast once they've Kano'd into it and done something else. So mostly a blue, mostly just a blue, but definitely a reasonable playable one at that. Extra freezing point also makes the cut again, very much for the same reason as Ice Bolt. We need to be able to present damage in a meaningful way while holding blues to prevent ourselves from dying. Dash a matchup that has gotten noticeably harder. The more experienced that people are in the Dash matchup, the better they are against you. They are very good at having chunks of blues in their deck very, very late, and just cycling gunshots, which are very hard to block all of. And they get much bigger with Plasma Purifiers. So, yeah, not the best of matchups, not one you're super, super happy to see, but I do have some cards for you and some tips and tricks. So sideboard cards you do not want in this matchup. We're not playing defense reactions against Dash. We're going to be pretty happy to block early with a lot of our cards, to be honest, while setting up arsenals and burning them through those reds. We need to prioritize shutting down the gunshots, so the defense reactions don't do quite as much for us in a spot like that. No Arcane Barrier stuff, no Fighting Spirits, no E-Pots, and only the 2 Arctics again, because they are mostly here to up our blue count in this matchup. Normal Equipment Suite. We are playing the Oasis Respite, still just too good to not play. Really strong sometimes against like Payload when they're getting dominated, or even like Overblasts, just attacks that you wouldn't be able to block properly otherwise. Sometimes they just have a Teklo Pounder out, and being able to Oasis Respite profitably is very, very strong. We do need to put pressure on our opponents in this matchup, because we're going to need to be able to Stormstrider's kill on those final couple turns of the game. So it's important for us to up our red count and have more red damage. So you do see the extra freezing point and the 3 red Ice Bolts making the cut in this matchup. We can afford to play more reds because we're not playing these defense reactions. So if you're considering playing these against Dash, consider that you might not be able to play as much red damage as well. The key cards for this matchup are actually one that we bought in and one we don't. Hypothermia and Channel Lake Frigid. These are going to be the things that shut down multiple gunshots. It stops the chambers and the purifiers being charged. It's going to stop them being able to pay for multiple gunshots. The key, however, in my opinion, is to not burn these early unless you have to. And I'll explain why. Channel Lake Frigid and Hypothermia are going to prevent more damage the longer you can save them. If you can get them into your second cycle so that when the game is degenerated down to opponent loads all their equipment and fires gunshot for 3 to 4 times, you're going to prevent 12 damage with a Hypothermia or a Channel Lake Frigid by stopping that entire turn cycle of 4s. If you burn them early, you're stopping a turn cycle of 2s, which is nowhere near as much damage prevented or saved. They're very important cards, especially in the end game, so consider not burning them early in spots you don't have to if you think your hand can profitably block, or play out a chill, or make an arcane damage-based exchange without giving up too much life. You really do want to save them if you can. If you can't, though, they're going to save you a lot of life early. They are still your most important cards for a reason. So save them if you can, play them out if you can't. In addition to that, we've got our Blizzards and our Brain Freezes. Once again, matchups where these are just quite good. Blizzard not at its best here, sadly, as it is kind of easy for them to have enough blues to pay through it. But it does mean you get attacked like 1 less time in a lot of spots, which means it blocks enough damage. Above all else, it pairs very well with 0 costs out of the arsenal, alongside things like Arctic Incarceration to really tax how many gunshots can be had after a high octane turn or after a boosted throttle or something. Brain Freeze is super reasonable here at taking away copies of 0 to 60, taking away copies of T-Bone, all kinds of zeros that are just like, it basically blocks 4 damage as a result of that if it takes away a red 0 to 60. Or sometimes you can just snipe a blue out of your opponent's hand once they have played out a red and make it so they can't charge their gun properly. So really reasonable card in this matchup too. Big fan of Brain Freeze. If you were looking to improve this matchup, it's definitely one where playing the Exposed to the Elements over the Null Rune Hood would do you some good, I think. Because a lot of dashes these days are bringing AB4. And in a world where they're bringing AB4, you do kind of want a way to get rid of the Physiotronic Model I and bring that down to AB2, which makes the matchup much, much better for you, in my opinion, to be able to chip damage with Waning Moon every turn. So if you can do that and find space for exposed and you prefer it over the hood, it's going to be really good in this matchup, and you're going to want it against Ash. Briar. Briar is a matchup where we do not want any of our Null Rune style equipment except for Metacarpus Node. We are playing the node over the gauntlet for the reasons we explained earlier. Want to play our Tunic to be able to pay for our wands, but we need to keep that Rosetta Thorn in check, and sometimes you need that last bit of burst damage in this matchup. No Ice Bolts, no Fate for Scenes. We got to be a little lighter on defense reactions in this matchup to be better at dealing with Arcane and have access to more important tools. No Fighting Spirit, no Freezing Point, no Energy Potions. Node in the armor instead of the Gauntlet, as said before. Sinks and Oasis still make the cut. Still an aggro matchup. Still very much expected to be able to utilize these cards to their best of their abilities. Hypothermia, just insane in this matchup, as we kind of talked about before. Relying on Embodiment Lightnings to get Go Again means you can often just turn that Go Again off again and stop the Rosetta Thorn or more attacks coming in a lot of cases, which is fantastic. This is another matchup where you find you Coronet peak pretty often, especially on Channel Mount Heroic turns. The best way to think about that is if you can turn your card in hand into blocking 7. It's a pretty good card if you can turn your average card into an unmovable. And Coronet Peak will let you do that on Channel Mount Heroic turns because you're able to just turn any blue into a 1-for-1, which means they have 1 less attack, which is often going to be 7 damage. So do keep that in mind. Very much the same with Hypothermia, just insane on a Channel Mount Heroic turn because of the amount of damage it will prevent for you. And then we have the full suite of reactive blues. We're actually playing the Arctics here to keep our blue count up over something like Fate Foreseen. As we kind of mentioned before, blue count important in this matchup. Need to be on 42 if we can possibly. So I'm playing the extra blues instead of playing the Fate Foreseens in a matchup like this. I just think it's correct, and will not change my mind on that, I don't think. Brave Freeze, Blizzard, very, very good for the same reasons as the other aggro matchups. Just really good at sniping Force of Nature, the Snatches, any number of zero-cost cards, Minnoisms from Belittle. And Blizzard just very, very strong into the non-Belittle versions of Briar, being able to shut down a turn when they're playing quite light on the blues. Arctic, I think, is slightly better in this matchup, honestly, because it's kind of reasonable at taking off those Rosetta Thorn swings. I want more blues to pay for Arcane, and I do think this is going to save you a lot of life in the long run. If you catch the Briar list that are playing Revel in Runeblood, you really can catch them with their pants down if they extend off of the last card in hand being a Revel or playing it off of a Spellbound Creepers, and they want to use their Tunic to swing Rosetta Thorn. Well, Blue Arc Incarceration does a lot of damage if you catch them in a spot like that. At the very least, this matchup is kind of like Visceri, super tempo orientated, so these extra zero-cost non-attack actions that trigger your Waning Moon cheaply while letting you prevent Arcane with the extra resource are very, very valuable. So that is exactly why I would play those. Bravo! Bravo, a deck I'm not expecting to see very much of at the moment. Bravo kind of falling off a bit in the face of Aggro Oldhim taking his place. But we do have a plan for him. It looks very similar to the Oldhim plan, unsurprisingly. But no Hypothermias here. Less of that going on. They tend to be on just Zealous Belting and not so much Enlightened Strike. But if you do know that's not the case, you can consider playing these, much like we talked about before. No Blizzards, no Fighting Spirits, no Ice Bolts, and then no Null Rune equipment. Normal suite in place. Defense reactions, including Fate Foreseen, just completely insane against a Guardian. You want to stop those big dominated attacks from taking your skull off. Shouldn't need too much more explanation than that, I don't think. Energy Potion, very, very strong in this matchup because we are looking for those Frost-Hex kills. We want to make the biggest Ice Eternal that we can once we've set up our combo pieces, and that's something that we need Energy Potion to be able to do. Extra Freezing Point, again, just your best Storm Striders target in this matchup. Very, very good for disrupting by fusing through Insidious Chill. Stop yourself getting pummeled in a lot of spots. Very good at late game burst damage to set up a imperfect hex if your opponent is getting more and more aggressive into you. And then we just round out with the suite of blues. Again, Arctic, very, very strong in this matchup, helping keep that blue count up. But just 6 damage in the late game off of Frost Hex if you are able to set that up and go late against Bravo. If you do find they are on E-Strikes and Zealous Beltings and multiple other ways of attacking twice, like Rouse the Ancients, good chance you can just play the Hypothermias instead of these, in my opinion. Or instead of the Brain Freezes too. Brain Freeze very much a blue block 3 in this matchup, and cards blocking 3 definitely super valuable on your blues when you're getting crunched by as many big attacks as you are. But this doesn't take anything, it's just a 0-cost non-attack action that will occasionally trigger Waning Moon, and it's mostly here as a blue block 3. So you can definitely play Hypothermia over either of these if you would prefer, but love having access to the additional reds, love all the defense reactions, and setting up that big Frost Hex kill as soon as we possibly can. Boltyn. Boltyn, a matchup that I have very little experience in, sadly. It's not one I've played very much, so most of this is definitely theory, but I think it makes sense in theory. No Null Rune equipment, no Ice Bolts, no Fighting Spirits, no Fate for Scenes. A little bit of a weird one for some people against Boltyn, but I don't think they hit you particularly hard outside of their combo turns, and I needed to balance my blue count, which is why we're playing some Arctic Incarcerations and no E-Pots here in this case either. Normal suite of equipment. Defense reactions that we do play, Sync, Oasis, Respite, still very good on those combo turns and perhaps stopping cards from getting into the soul. Hypothermia, Channel Egg Frigid, just absolute train wreck cards for Boltyn if they get caught on their combo turn. I really wouldn't hate just setting Hypothermia in your arsenal and waiting in this matchup. I'm not entirely sure a Boltyn player can kill you without their Luminar Ascension turns. And Hypothermia just says end the turn. The turn actually just ends immediately, which is beyond stupid. So I can't imagine you would want to burn these aggressively in that matchup. It kind of just wins the game by itself. Your deck is already no attacks, barring the emptiness, so they can never pump their stuff organically, so they have to go through so many hoops to get go again that it seems very, very hard for them to win this matchup. Extra Freezing Point fills in the gap to have that extra piece of burst damage off of your Storm Striders. And then we're down to the blues. Brain Freeze takes away Luminar Ascension and all kinds of other things in this matchup. Just once again, fantastic like it is in most aggro matchups. Blizzard, another card that just kind of dunks on the combo turn, makes it very, very hard for them to have enough resources to do everything. And then a couple of Arctics to round out the count here. Again, cheap disruption that can in fact help on a combo turn. Otherwise, there's a blue 0-cost that will cheaply trigger Waning Moon. So definitely something that we're interested in to round out our blue count. That is what we look like against Boltyn. Azalea, a matchup I've somehow played more than Boltyn, but not often, obviously. Yeah, so very much no Ice Bolts, no Blizzards, no E-Pots, no Freezing Point, no Fighting Spirits in this matchup. Apparently the equipment is not listed correctly in this case, but unsurprisingly, you will not be playing any of the Arcane Barrier equipment. Gonna go fix that real quick while I keep talking. So yeah, you're looking at, unsurprisingly, just having an absolute chunk of defense reactions in against Azalea. Unsurprisingly, you very much just want to be able to stop the big Go Tall arrows. Go Tall arrows are the only thing Azalea does well, in my opinion, and you will be expecting to see a fair amount of, because Go Tall arrows, very dangerous. We kind of talked about this in the Lexi matchup. It's not something you really want to see, to be completely honest. So having the most defense reactions you can, the best you can do. For the most part, Azalea not firing multiple arrows or attacking multiple times, which is why Blizzard doesn't make the cut. But we do need to keep that blue count high, and occasionally they will, courtesy of things like Enlightened Strike or other options. So we do think Hypothermia makes the cut, and at the very worst, this will cheaply activate Waning Moon for you too. We then round out with the more disruptive blues to help tide us over. Brain Freeze really solid here. It is just against Ranger in general for taking away 0-cost arrows. You can just completely ruin their turn. If you take away a 0-cost arrow, or sometimes if you take away a blue, they can't load their bow and do their things as they want to do. And it's very, very strong at doing that. And Arctic Incarceration, same thing. These Ranger decks run on such fine margins on non-3-of-a-kind turns that you really want to be able to disrupt that and just kind of shut down the second arrow, shut down the extra pump effect, meaning Arctic blocks for quite a lot in those spots. Iyslander, the Mirror Matchup card. So the mirror match is something that people are very interested in right now, because it's kind of picking up in popularity. There's a lot of Iyslander all over the shop. So no Coronet, no Tunic, no Gauntlet. We are on AB5 in this matchup. No defense reactions, no Fighting Spirits, no Blizzards. All fairly self-explanatory. Hypothermia, again, gets a nod over Blizzard because we want the card that triggers Waning Moon, not the one that doesn't. We just want as much red damage to play the tempo game in this matchup as we can. So Ice Bolts, Freezing Points, all maxed out where they can be to accompany this like imperfect hex kill you often find yourself getting against Iyslander. The key to the mirror, you know, Insidious Chill. Once again, just amulets, these kind of cards. Constellus can often make this matchup go on forever because you're able to get infinite moon activations that you're all trying to make sure you don't die to. So yeah, you really do want to be able to chill and amulet your opponent's hand away, Ice Vein your opponent's hand away, so that you can sneak in a blue damage effect from your arsenal, and chuck a Waning Moon on there to get in for like 6 damage, which tends to be the chunks of damage you do in the mirror. So that your final like Ice Eternal that triggers all your chills can often do like 15 and take the hand away. You need to make sure you don't die in response to that though. Do keep in mind your opponent can of course respond with their own stuff, and you do want to be careful not to just be dead in response to that happening. Metacarpus Node very strong here for squeaking Aether Ice Veins through your opponent's AB. That will often come up if you don't mind burning it a little early. Epot, very, very strong again at just being able to pay for AB in spots where you want to keep cards, squeeze in an extra Waning Moon activation, or fuel an Ice Eternal in a spot where you need it to. Brain Freeze, again, mostly here as a blue, just all the blues in the deck to be able to pay for AB as often as you can. And Arctic Incarceration obviously plays very, very well with that Frost Hex game plan in the late game for all kinds of chip damage. It's a cheap way of activating Waning Moon, which is again exactly what you want when you expect to be preventing one Arcane from your opponent to put a counter on Constellus, and then spending 2 to activate your Waning Moon while you're charging your Constellus, or spending 3 to, of course, then charge up Constellus and prevent Arcane. So the cheaper these are, the more resources you're going to have to prevent your opponent's Arcane, which is definitely where you want to be. So that is where we are in the Iyslander matchup. Fai. Fai is a matchup that I actually want to revisit. This is currently where I'm at with the sideboarding for this matchup, but with there now being so many different versions of Fai, and they're evolving to play, engulfing Flame Waves and Kodachis, and just trying out different things, this probably needs to be reviewed and revisited. We're on none of the Null Rune equipment. No Ice Bolts, no Arctics, no Epots, no Fighting Spirits, and only the 2 Fate Foreseens. This is mostly a space consideration and making sure that we keep that blue count high enough. Normal equipment suite here. Defense reactions that we're happy to have. I do think there are now enough hit triggers in Fai that we need to respect them a little more when we're blocking with 2 cards. So I have the extra Fate Foreseens in alongside Sync and Oasis Respite. Mostly for these engulfing flame waves and these similar cards that are like proving to be very, very problematic dealing with those hit triggers. They're very good at handling snatches. They give you some more flexibility to play around Ancestral Empowerment or Razor Reflex by being able to block with a card and then have a way to stop that attack reaction getting through to score mass triggers regardless of what mask they might be playing. Hypothermia definitely has to make the cut. Not only is it okay against traditional Fai for turning off Soaring Emberblade, Searing Emberblade, I should say, sorry, and like flames and stuff, but this is now even better against Kodachi Fai because the Kodachis just get shut the hell down by Hypothermia, so definitely makes the cut. I'm currently on the extra freezing point over the extra Fate Foreseen. This is a change I can see myself making depending how Fai continues to evolve. I do think for the most part you don't want the 3 freezing points in this matchup, but I found myself... How do I put it? I found Fai quite hard, honestly. These current versions of Fai have been a matchup I'm not super happy to see. And I found myself having to establish early Insidious chills to score wins. And in that world I need a damage effect to fuse to make those chills worth taking all the damage I did. To get them on the table, so I feel like having the extra red to fuse is probably worthwhile, but I would explore playing 2 and playing the extra Fate Foreseen and trying to get more Waning Moon hits in. It's likely an avenue that's worth taking a look at. And then there's the rest of the anti-aggro blues in the form of Blizzard and Brain Freeze, both very, very good against Fai for obvious reasons. Dromai, our last matchup on the agenda here to take a quick look at. As we talked about before, this matchup is all about racing. You just want to dunk damage into their face as quickly as you can so there is not enough Ash Wings to prevent it, and then you can hopefully get enough damage through after handling Thermai and time walking your opponent a few times with cheap blues to get yourself over the line. No need for anything other than Node in this matchup. We are playing Node, as we mentioned before, to help kill Thermais, have some burst damage at the end, and keep Burn Them All and Asvalai in check, but no other changes required. You want nothing defensive, no Respites, no Sink Below, no Fate Foreseen. You don't want the Heart in this matchup either, because it not blocking can be a liability, and you're often going to hope that your opponent is on less life than you, because if they're not, you've probably fucked it. No Epots in this matchup either. Again, not blocking, not aggressive, doesn't need to make the cut. We are going for 4 poppers. You need to remember, of course, that your emptiness will often not have Dominate in this matchup because you are playing Fighting Spirit. If it does, feel free to play it. If it doesn't, this should probably be reserved to be a popper only if you can help it. But all the red damage, red ice bolts, red freezing points, red incases, as much red damage and you can get in your deck as you possibly can. Hypothermia, really good at time walking your Dromai opponent. Just play it as the Ashwing attacks and they don't have go again anymore. And you can moon them for some damage, which is kind of fantastic because this costs 0. Exactly what you want. And then again, the full slew of interactive blues. Brain Freeze, actually pretty reasonable in this matchup. Can take away all the 0-cost dragons in a pinch. Can often sometimes take away a blue from your opponent too, with something like an Energy Potion or a Passing Mirage, which makes it much harder for them to pay for Arcane. Other than that, it's a blue block 3. Blizzard can often shut down a turn on this like mostly red deck if it cannot pay to attack with more of its dragons, which is exactly what you want to do in those later turns of the game. Arctic Incarceration, same thing. Deck is very, very red light, so when you're looking to get to that final point of the game where you're trying to squeak in damage, 0-cost piece of disruption that either kills an Ashwing to take the action point away or charges them enough resources to not be able to keep hitting you with more dragons. Activate Waning Moon, squeak in 3, because you're hoping you got them to 20, 17, 15 very early while you were dumping all these freezing points and incases and ice bolts and stuff into them. And you need to be able to get those last points of damage in with Waning Moon or cheap reds as you go. Don't be scared to take damage in this matchup. Do not be scared. As long as you are winning the turn cycle, you have Storm Striders, you're going to get that final piece of damage in to win the game if your life totals are even. Take hits from Visceri if it means that you're presenting more damage back. I will more than happily take 9 from a Visceri if it means that I am presenting 9 back. That is an okay transaction. Because you need the damage to go face to win the game. If you're wasting time killing dragons that aren't Thamai so you can keep playing the game, that's less damage going into your opponent's face, which gives them more time to make more Ashwings, at which point you are kind of boned. So yeah, you really do need to rely on your poppers and cheap Arcane and cheap Disruption in the later turns to stop those swings and send all those reds and even early blue Arcane damage effects just straight at the face. So please do keep that in mind. Last but not least here, I'm going to talk about a few of the cards that were in the previous list of Iyslander that haven't made the cut anymore. I do think for the most part, most things have stayed the same. I think most people can see the differences pretty clearly. But we're going to go over a few of the, I guess, cards I spoke quite highly of, I should say. And kind of tell you why they no longer make the cut in this current version. I'll do some more detail on this in the article that I'm going to write for .gg. So if you want some more detailed breakdowns of this, please feel free to go check that out in the near future. But first one that comes to mind for me, that I'm kind of like, why are you not playing? It's gonna be kind of the obvious one. What happened to Eisenhower Weathervane? I don't think Guardians give you time to pitch stack that game plan anymore. It's the sad truth. I do think if all the Oldhims are fatigue Oldhims, go back to playing them. Fantastic. But I do not think you get time anymore. Is the sad truth, to pitch stack that perfect kill that you really do want to set up in the Guardian matchup. So they just aren't good enough anymore. I do think there are a number of people in, I want to say the Australian Iyslander community, and I'm sure all over the globe elsewhere as well, that are quite high on the Ice Veins into aggro matchups to basically try and time walk them. And I do think that's an avenue that's worth exploring, but I can't say I'm a fan just yet, so they didn't end up making my cut for Nationals, unfortunately. Scour a card that I'm still a really big fan of, and I do think if you're expecting a lot of Visceri, you can find some space in your list for some Scours, because the card is just like matchup winning. It is very, very strong. But I just don't think Visceri is very popular right now, is the sad truth. And so it didn't make the cut for exactly that reason. And then last but not least, Channel the Bleak Expanse, a card that is near and dear to my heart, very skill testing, very powerful in the face of Belittle, Become the Arknight, several other effects that it just kind of shuts down, 3 of a kind, all these kind of very powerful haymakers, even Blood Rush Bellows. And the sad truth is this one fell by the wayside to make space. When we were adjusting the deck to find cards to be better against Dromai, more red damage, like red Ice Bolt, yellow Ice Vein, we had to lose some things. Space had to be found. And I thought we were good enough into the aggro matchups anyway to not need Bleak Expanse in those spots. And when you went up to 9 Ice Veins, it's much harder for the card to be good for you in the mirror too, because you turn off your own Aether Ice Veins by accident, which is not the best look. As a result, it kind of hit the curb. I do think, however, it's the kind of card you want to be looking to explore, playing if you're hitting a lot of belittles. It's really, really good at taking your opponent off those minnowisms to stop them having enough resources to not take damage while pressuring you. And that's a very, very valuable effect. So if you're looking for something to dial those belittles down, it's going to be the card for you, and maybe you can find some space somewhere. But that is the reason why it did not make the cut in this list for Nationals. To cover those matchups that I played at Nationals real quickly as well, first 3 rounds of Swiss were Oldhim, Iyslander, Oldhim, and unfortunately the second Oldhim was the only match of CC I lost this weekend to back-to-back fused Oakenolds, one of which was pummeled, so these things happen. And then the other 3 rounds of CC on day 2 of the event, I played against Briar, another Iyslander for the second mirror of the weekend, and then a Dorinthea as the final matchup of the day, and won all 3 of those. I think that should be everything for this video. It's I know a little more casual than last time, but it's a whole half an hour longer, so hopefully it's significantly more comprehensive, covers all those matchups, and gives you all the data you're looking for if you're looking to take Iyslander to your Nationals. If I can do anything else for you, and you want to know more, just reach out to me. I'm super open to talk and help with everybody as best I can, now that I'm kind of re-embarking on this content creator journey. Follow me on Twitter, HowlingMines, on Twitch, HowlingMines, YouTube, HowlingMines, all over the place. And go check out that article and the work I'm going to be producing for DotGG over on their site, as well as they kind of dip their toes into Flesh and Blood. And in fact, I'll push that even a little more. If you're passionate about seeing good Flesh and Blood content being hosted on big gaming sites, please do check out the work I'm about to do for DotGG in the coming weeks, because it will need your support if we want it to stick. Last but not least, I've had a few people reach out about coaching. I'm working on some details for folks that have already asked about coaching playing Iyslander, and I'm very honoured that you think I'm good enough to do that. But I'll make it clear that I'm open to the idea with people as well. So if you're another one of those folks that is interested in learning more about the deck and wants me to maybe do commentary on your games, I guess, we can sort something out. So feel free to reach out to me on your preferred platform and have a chat. Last but not least, I'm exploring trying to go to Worlds. I don't think I can afford it, unfortunately. But I'm looking at maybe selling a few things to fund the trip. Because I would be honoured to play Flesh and Blood's first World Championship if I can get a PTI and cover my travel expenses. So if you're going to be there, let me know. It's going to be a lot easier for me to stomach if I know I'm going to be seeing fantastic folks in the community at Worlds and get to meet you all and get to explore that avenue and really make the best of what Flesh and Blood is. So if you're going to be there, please tell me, and I would love to hear all about the details and what you intend on doing. I think that's everything. I know I've talked for nearly 2 hours, but hopefully you enjoyed the content. I've been HowlingMines. You've been amazing. Thank you for joining me on this journey into Flesh and Blood. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your day.